Hey there, if you're someone who normally listens to us on a podcast platform, this might be a fun one to watch on YouTube. Hope you enjoy.
I am here today with Jo Oxley, the producer of the LabVIEW Experiment. She does all the hard work.
It's true.
Yeah, I just show up and do the talking, which is cool and fun, and I enjoy, and I would be doing anyway. But she makes the whole podcast magic happen behind the scenes. So, and also I've got Noah here too, who's off camera. Maybe you'll say hello. He is the person who is now doing our editing and some of the recording. So,
yeah, we're here today celebrating our end of season 1.
Yeah, 26 episodes.
25. This is 25.
Oh, okay. All right,
yeah.
Okay.
So we're having some
we took a break for
mimosas. Yeah. It's the end of GDevCon week. It's very exciting.
There you go. I don't think I've ever actually had a mimosa.
What?
Have you really? Yeah, I've drank champagne before, but I don't think I've ever had a mimosa.
All right, I'm going to get off camera and pour Noah one.
The lady ran my co-working space, Jen, she was very much into mimosas. That was her thing. But
they're fine.
I have to say it's quite good.
I'll take a Bloody Mary in the morning over a mimosa.
My wife likes Bloody Marys. Bacon Bloody Marys.
Yeah.
Go to the ski resort and get bacon Bloody Mary after a day of skiing. It's good.
Best way to wake up for camping.
Yeah. It's like, it feels healthy. It feels like a salad and a drink.
Exactly.
Until you throw the bacon in it, and then it's like, okay, maybe it's not that healthy anymore.
So, season 1, we did 20, this is episode 25, 24 episodes of real content, because this is just going to be fluff. But we hope you all enjoy it.
The entertainment value will be high.
The entertainment value will be high. So, of those 24, what are some of your highlights of the season? Do you have any favorite stories that stick out to you? I know I have some of my own.
Well, first of all, I'm going to offend some people because I'm not going to pick everybody. But I enjoyed all of the interviews. There was not one that I did not like or get something out of. I thought starting off with Enrique as the first guest was really awesome because he was enthusiasm. He was way more enthusiastic than I was. So that was really cool.
Yeah, we love Enrique.
I enjoyed my conversation with Olivier because I think we hit on some very important topics around open source and the community and supporting the community. I
really liked Olivier's episode too. I thought he brought up some really interesting points about the viability of open source tools opposed to their value, because they do have a really high value, but it's just not that easy to keep them alive if people aren't going to support them. Yeah,
I've had lots of conversations with people about building tools in LabVIEW and stuff, and a lot of people want to try to figure out how to monetize them and stuff, and it's really tough. But making them open source and making the community a better place is just a good thing to do in general, but it's also good advertising marketing too. So. Well,
I think there's an interesting line between having them make money and having them pay for themselves. Mm-hmm. Those are two different things. And we talk about that a lot, especially with this podcast. Yeah. We're just putting it out because we want to share a resource with the community. Yeah. We want it to pay for itself. We don't necessarily need to make money on it.
Yeah, so absolutely.
If you want to sponsor us next season, just send me an email.
I think about that with tools like DQMH and VIPM and stuff. Everybody knows Fabiola and everybody knows Jim and JKI and because of the tools that they put out there in the community.
Yeah.
They do a lot of other stuff too, but I think those tools are what really drive a lot of the name recognition.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hurt that they're not afraid to get up and speak and talk to, and are very outspoken.
Yeah, that is true. Fabiola grabbed me at GDevCon and tried to convince me that I need to learn to code. She's like, why aren't you coding? And I'm like, I don't know.
Well, I'm happy to teach you if you ever change your mind. So those were some things that stuck out to me. One of the things that stuck out to me the most that smacked me in the face is kind of like an aha moment. I was talking to Jorg, and I did the question, can you tell me about an experiment you tried and something you learned? He said, he's like, there's not really anything that sticks out in my mind. At first I was like, oh, really? And then he's like, yeah, because we just set up all our experiments to be so small that when we fail, it's no big deal. So I don't even really notice when we fail at experiments anymore. It's a normal part of our daily work.
Yeah.
I thought that was really great.
They don't even call it a failure.
No, yeah. Yeah, and then Bill Welch, I think, too, is it's not failure, it's learning. And I thought that was a great response, too. So.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think one of the stories that kind of sticks out to me is Alan's story about the fire science.
Oh, the wind thing. Yes, that was a crazy
tunnel
story, yes.
Yeah. And then another one I thought was cool was John was talking about putting diamonds on circuit boards, which I had no idea.
For the contact, yeah.
Yeah, it was a thing. I thought that was cool, too.
I also want to highlight, we did talk to a few people outside the LabVIEW community, like Andrea, which I think was very interesting. And that's one of the goals I have for this, is to bring people from outside the community, software experts, but also people in other areas of technology, like Andrea, who talked about empathy. And I think that's a really big thing. That came up actually twice at GDevCon.
Oh.
So I mentioned her in my intro thing, and then immediately afterwards, Stephen York mentioned Andrea in their presentation. So
That's really cool.
And then Fab was all excited because I guess she was one of the first people to interact with Andrea and like catch her name and then bring her into the community.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I really liked the episode with Dr. G, but you know this because I also work with Dr. G as one of my clients. So it was cool to have the two of you in the room talking about what you both do. And that one was super interesting to me because I know both sides of it.
Yeah. Well, to anybody who's listening to that episode, in the beginning of that episode, she goes on and talks about how she got into technology stuff. And when I was there, I was like, where's this conversation going exactly? But if you stick through that part of the conversation, get to the second half, the second half is a lot of back and forth between us. And that part I thought was really, really, I mean, the first part kind of sets the stage. But
it kind of gives you the background of how she got into trauma-informed UX UI. But she asked a lot of great questions, especially around AI and where that's going to take us in the future. I mean, I know that's a hot topic right now that's on everybody's minds.
Yeah, well, as we're recording this, that just released like this week, and I just listened to it, so that's kind of in the back of my head talking about that. So yeah, I have to like re-listen to it because we've done so many. Sometimes they blend together and stuff. So every time one comes out, I listen to it like the day it comes out, just so that when I go to the virtual coffee the next day and people ask me questions, it's like fresh in my mind. Yeah,
because some of these were recorded, months and months prior. I think Dr. G's came out in July and we reported it in April. So.
Yeah, well, you're going to talk about a preview of next season, but we did some interviews at N.A. Connects and they're probably not going to come out for a few months.
Yeah, we did some interviews at N.A. Connects in May, and those aren't going to come out until season 2 drops.
Those are really great
in
interviews.
September.
So actually some of my favorite interviews there, like talking to Chris Cellino about culture and stuff. And talking to Brian just at GDevCon N.A. about culture. So that's some stuff to look forward to.
Yeah. Here's some stuff to look forward to in season 2.
Tell me about an experiment that you tried that didn't work out the way you thought it would, and what did you learn?
This is where I kind of really got my professional software engineering and software development education, all centered around LabVIEW, which is the language I love. So I'm a LabVIEW champion.
It's just one of these things where I was only able to get to it because I knew how to get through all of those layers. There were no accelerators. There were no hints. It happened to be all this tribal knowledge that I had, total Sherlock Holmes mode. I knew how to get to the code, dive in, and all that.
Is this the Orange Bowl day?
This was back in the days of the Orange Bowl.
Why don't you tell that story? Because I don't think people know. Not everybody knows that story.
That bothered me a lot. There are different parts of my life where I'm type A and different parts where I'm not. And this is definitely one of those where I was type A, and like that backlog just bothered the hell out of me.
And some of them had taken the Core 1, Core 2. But the problem is that a lot of companies, you take the Core 1, Core 2, then it's 6 months before you ever get to use it, and they've forgotten everything.
All of the things you can get into in LabVIEW, like there's a lot of there's a lot of LabVIEW hacking, and I get called a LabVIEW hacker because I like to explore the attic and the basement and find all of the secret stuff.
Season 2 of the LabVIEW Experiment will be coming your way on September 26th. There's still time to secure a sponsorship. Just send us an email if you're interested.
So, I'm very curious. Not just curious, I'm very, very curious. What did you, as an outsider to the LabVIEW community, right? I mean, you talk to a lot of people in the LabVIEW community, but you're not a programmer, which is totally cool. Mm-hmm. But what did you learn?
Well, I learned that I need stronger passwords.
Oh, from that Chris episode.
From the Chris episode. Password 1 apparently isn't going to cut it.
Yeah. Well, security did come up at GDevCon N.A. There was a presentation on it. Actually, I pushed Eric to have that presentation because I've been interested in security for quite a while, actually.
Well, yeah, and that's something that you say to me all the time. Like, we have our vault of our passwords, and it's like not ones that are words or phrases. It's 5XQW exclamation point or whatever.
The 20 characters and use all the special characters.
Yeah, and you've been doing that with me for as long as I've worked with you.
You managed to make that work and figure it out?
Well, we have our vault, so I can just copy paste or whatever, but all of my passwords, I have 8 email accounts. I can't do stuff like that for my 8 email accounts. I have to have stuff that I can remember when I have to type it in. But I'm learning that, Dance 09 that I've had since I was 16 16 probably isn't cutting it anymore. I did learn more than that. That's just, base level. I think it was super interesting as an outsider to learn more about technically kind of what you do, while I may not understand like the tiny minute details of what it is overarching. I'm starting to understand a little bit more about like what the architecture looks like and how it works.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting how a lot of these principles play into like my other client work.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Talking about, Hunter talked about being able to talk to your end users, right? Was that Hunter?
Hunter was definitely talking about part of that, yeah. Hunter's big thing was data, so like taking numbers and actually getting to insights and then actions. I thought that was really cool.
Well, and I think he was talking about, if you can learn what some of your end users, like if you can change a placement of a button or something like that, and that kind of helps to cultivate a relationship just by making something a little bit easier for them, then that makes the process easier. And I definitely relate to that because I do a lot of administrative work for a lot of different types of people. So I related to that especially.
Well, I feel like as a contractor, right, the biggest thing you have is trust. And the easiest way to build trust is to get those little wins early. So find the little tiny things that aren't even that important, but just show them that you can tweak little things and make little changes.
Right.
And show them the impact of that and that you're willing to like listen to their feedback and do the things that they ask you to do and like you can actually do it. That's huge.
Yeah. Exactly. And then just different principles across it. I thought it was really interesting learning more. I know we talked about Olivier. That was probably one of my favorite episodes with Olivier.
Was it just the French accent though?
I did love the French accent, Olivier. I did love it. But
not quite as good as the Mexican accent from Enrique.
I do love
Enrique's got a good accent
too. Well, Enrique is also a favorite because he did bring me chocolates at GDevCon from Mexico.
Thank you, Enrique. He brought me some as well.
We love you for that. Give me presents. That's all. Well, what did you learn this season?
I learned a whole lot. A lot of it was just kind of refining some of my existing thoughts. So I'm a very external processor. So I write blog posts and I have these conversations because it helps me to clarify what I think through like the conversation and the back and forth. So in talking to Malcolm and Mark, I helped me refine my idea of like, what is the value that we as contractors bring, and how is that different from being an individual contributor within a company, and how can I bring the most value and leverage that outside position? I think is very interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the points that Malcolm made was about, maybe it was Malcolm, but low code, no code. Like if you can go into a project and you don't have to code it, why are you redoing it? And I feel the same. Like if I am trying to bring on a new client and I see a simple solution that I can say, okay, like I'm going to charge you a consultation fee, but like here are the 3 steps you need to take to have more success. I don't need to charge you for a whole package or anything like that.
Well, I think it's all about taking a step back and realizing what the goal is. And as software engineers, we sometimes think the goal is to write software, but that's not really the goal. The goal is to solve the problems. Right? Yeah, and if solving the problem, if you can do it without writing software, well, hey, software is expensive to write and code and maintain and stuff. So if you can do it with something off the shelf or something that already exists, like that is almost always the better answer.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And then in talking to Jeff, I learned a lot about teams and managing teams and stuff. That's something as a solo developer and kind of my own thing I don't deal with as much as I would like. I really like that human interaction side, and I'm hoping to do more in that arena. So that was some useful insights. And then the really interesting thing, the spot where I think I learned the most was in talking to Andrea. And part of it was on the podcast, and she and I have been interacting a lot lately through her empathy and tech group. But a lot of it was just getting a really technical understanding of empathy. And like, it's not just this like touchy-feely thing. There's actually like things that you can do, like concrete things, and there's concrete ways of thinking about it and breaking things down. I thought that was really interesting. I think we touched on that in our talk. And one of the very interesting things, being an electrical engineer, talking about Claude Shannon and information transfer theory and compression and those things, like that's super technical.
Right.
And anybody who's an electrical engineer will know what I'm talking about, like, and you talk about interference and stuff, and the interference in like your interpersonal relationship, like you say something and the other person interprets something else because there's this interference. And the interference is all the other emotions and things that are going on in their life. And like, they're feeling, the relationship between the two of you, and it's very, very interesting and deep. So that's pretty cool. And I mentioned the empathy attack. The other cool thing that I learned, being an external processor, I committed to doing a presentation for Empathy and Tech on selling your ideas. And it was interesting because I went into it with one thought. So I'd watched this presentation from J.B. Rainsberger. And my initial thought was, I'll just replicate this presentation because it's so awesome, everybody should go see it. And I stopped to think, and I was like, well, that presentation is recorded, so why am I going to repeat everything he says? I can just send people there. How can I make this my own? And what I realized was risk plays a very key part in selling your ideas. And I'm in a unique position to understand risk because I do a lot of rock climbing and mountaineering and stuff. And all of that is about managing risk because, like, if you don't manage risk, you don't live to be an old rock climber. Like, there are old climbers, there are bold climbers, there are no old, bold climbers because they all die.
Unless they're really lucky.
It's kind of morbid, but, like, it's like the same, right? Because, like, you can only take so many risks and eventually it catches up to you.
Right.
So,
or your knees catch up to you, one of the two.
Well, yeah, that's from the ultra running stuff. I've kind of given that up. The last couple of times I tried, it was not as fun as it used to be. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll do another 100-miler.
The average career span for a base jumper is 5 years.
Yeah.
Either you die or you get out of it.
Yeah. Mountaineering, like, I don't know. I feel like in the first couple of years, people either, like, there's a high filter, like people who just are reckless, like either like they either die or they scare the crap out of themselves and say never again. So like it tends to filter for people who are good at managing risk.
Do you think that translates into developers at all?
Well, I do think there's a huge overlap between developers and technical people in general and rock climbing.
Rock climbing specifically, or like outdoor sports?
Well, outdoor sports overall, but generally rock climbing and mountaineering, because rock climbing and mountaineering are very technical things. Like rock climbing, you're talking about forces and vectors. Like there's two types of rock climbing. There's the people who just like the gymnastic movement, and that's one thing. And that's also problem solving, right? Like I got all these holds, how do I connect them? How do I move my body? But there's also the gear junkies who just like nerd out over like, oh, I've got this carabiner, it's this exact shape, and it does this, that. I enjoy some of that, but that always also goes back to the what's the point? Like, you need to be able to use these systems to do some practical thing, and it's not about nerding out over the equipment, but I still nerd out over it sometimes.
I mean, I think everybody kind of does. Have you had, I mean, this is kind of talking about SAS and a project that we're working on right now, but I didn't quite make the connection. Have you been having like a lot of fun working with our current project with the auto belay?
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
We can talk about auto belays in general.
I don't know if we could talk about the company.
So auto belays are these things that if you go to a climbing gym, right, there's two types of climbing. You can climb on ropes, right? So you climb up 10, 50 feet, you fall off.
Bouldering, right?
Bouldering is what it's called. And then you could do what's called top roping. And there's also lead climbing, but that's a whole separate issue.
I did teach rock climbing for a while. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, you and I need to talk after this because I did not know that at all. I had no idea.
I mean, I taught it to children.
Okay.
And I don't have any skills myself. They just taught me how to belay and how to like set it up and everything else.
But the other type of climbing people often do at the gym is top roping, where you have a rope, and the rope like runs from you up through the top of the climb. There's an anchor, and it comes back down the other side, and you have a climber and a belayer. And the climber climbs, and as they climb, there's slack in the rope.
Right.
Okay. So like, you know, when you start at the bottom climb, it's a 50-foot climb. You got 100 feet of rope between you and the belayer. You climb up 10 feet. He pulls out the 10 feet of slack, and then when you let go, you got 90 feet of rope between you, and you're 10 feet off the ground. And maybe the rope stretches a little bit, but that's the basic idea. And so as you climb up there, they're like pulling in rope. So like when you let go, you just hang, and then when you get to the top, they slowly lower you back down in a controlled manner. That works, except that like oftentimes in a gym climbing situation particularly, you want to climb by yourself, right? And so if you want to climb by yourself, you're kind of limited with just the normal top rope stuff. You're limited to just doing bouldering, right? Because you don't want to climb up like 50 feet and fall off because that's really bad. You get hurt. So an auto belay is like a thing. Think of it like a seatbelt winder, and it sits at the top of a climb, and there's like a piece of webbing that comes out, and it's clipped to some anchor at the bottom so it doesn't just like shoot up. And you clip that into your harness, and as you climb, it takes in slack. Right, so as you climb up 10 feet, it takes in 10 feet of slack. And then when you let go, right, if it just held you, you would stay there forever, and that's not good. So you need to be able to get back down. So what happens is you let go, and there's like a clutch or something, and it catches. So you do free fall for like a split second. It's scary as crap. You let go, you're like, oh crap, and then like, hell. And then once it catches, then it just slowly lowers you back down.
And you've been working on programming those for a company.
Well, testing those.
Testing
not
those.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, there's no they're almost always mechanical devices, no software in there. I wouldn't trust software with something like that. It's like anybody who writes software will understand when I say there are almost always software bugs, and you should never rely on software for safety critical systems. You only have like a mechanical interlock or some kind of emergency stop or something. But anyway, so what happens is these things need to be tested, right? Because you have to pull. You need to make sure that when the average person, when they climb up, that the thing actually retracts. And you need to make sure that when they get to the top and let go, that it lowers them at a reasonable rate, right? Because if it just dropped you, that's bad. You want to hit the ground at some velocity that like you could absorb with your, by bending your knees or whatever. And you want to do that over a wide range of weights too, right? Because you might have a kid climbing who weighs 50 pounds. You might have an adult who weighs 250 pounds. And you got to lower them both and make sure that they hit the ground at a reasonable speed, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah.
And so, as you can imagine, they have some tests. These auto belays, they certify them at the factory, and then every year or 2 years, you send them back into the company and they issue a new certificate. Right now, it's kind of voluntary, but if you don't, and then you get sued, that looks really bad, because why didn't you get this thing serviced? And recalibrated and all those things. So they have a rig where they have put this auto belay in there, and they have a motor, and it pulls on it with a certain tension, and it measures the force, and basically they use that to calculate. They capture a waveform that says this is the force over time, and it needs to fit some certain parameters so that like the velocity when you hit the ground is reasonable and survivable, and you're not going to like hurt yourself or break a leg or whatever. So
it's pretty cool.
So that's what we're working on with a company nearby in Boulder.
Yeah,
it was really cool. Shout out to Dave Thompson, who was a guest on here. He is the one who put me onto that. So yeah. Actually, so I get a lot of work from people in the LabVIEW community. Casey has put me onto some projects. We haven't interviewed Casey yet, but we will soon. So
yeah, Casey with Zaya Solutions, who is one of our sponsors this season.
Absolutely.
Let's learn more about Zaya Solutions.
Are you looking to accelerate your projects while ensuring future flexibility? Zaya Solutions' team of LabVIEW architects can help you realize your goals, from initial R&D prototyping through full-scale mission-critical deployments. With their extensive experience in test, automation, and systems integration, whether it's an actor framework program or a real-time distributed system, they'll get you up and running faster than ever. Learn more and check out their innovative open-source utilities for the LabVIEW community at zayasolutions.com. That is ZYAH solutions.com.
Okay, so now I'm going to quiz Taylor and see how much she's learned over this podcast. Because I know you've learned some things.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a very keen observer. Not a LabVIEW programmer yet. There's still hope for her. Maybe I'll convince her at some point. But she definitely understands the general world of LabVIEW and kind of things it's used for. So first of all, what does LabVIEW stand for?
LabVIEW is an acronym. I do know this. Laboratory, virtual, instrument. Oh, the E always gets me. Don't tell me I know what it is.
No one can get out some of the waiting, make it a little less awkward.
It's not experiment. It's
we are software
engineering work bench.
There you go.
Not work desk. Okay. Well, here's the funny thing. So, laboratory virtual instrument engineering work bench is what LabVIEW stands for. So, you made my GDevCon N.A. badge, and you put quotes on everybody's and you randomized them, but I asked you to put, did you know LabVIEW is an acronym on the back of mine. Ding. And so we're at the mixer, the Tesseract-sponsored mixer after the first day of GDevCon, and I'm chatting with Brian Powell and Andy McDonald, and they were asking what was on the back of my badge, and I'm like, did you know that LabVIEW was an acronym? And Brian laughed, and Andy was like, what? Sorry to call you out, Andy, but I got to teach Andy that LabVIEW is an acronym, and he just thought that the capitalization at the end was just like kind of a whatever thing, arbitrary thing, but it is an acronym.
I used LabVIEW for many years before I learned that, so.
I've used it for no years, and I know that, so.
Well, the capitalization is kind of a giveaway, but I just didn't.
If you take anything from this episode, LabVIEW is an acronym.
Well, okay, so totally changing topics. This is completely non-LabVIEW related, but you know SCUBA is an acronym too?
I did know it's an acronym. I don't know what it stands for.
Self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. But I didn't know that until,
Yeah.
Have you been scuba diving?
I did take a class, so yeah. So VIPM.
Okay. Virtual Instrument Programming Manual.
Wow.
Is that what it is?
No. Sorry. Well, VI is virtual instruments, so you got that part right. So the VI part is good. But actually, this stands for VI Package Manager, and VI stands for virtual instruments. So you got the first part.
PM Package Manager Program Manual.
Yeah, so basically, VIPM is a way to install packages, which is basically, I have LabVIEW, and out of the box, it does certain things, but there's other things that you may want to do. And somebody's already written that code, and so you use VIPM to install those packages.
Oh, so you just like
So then you
download
can-
it and
Yeah, it
hit
adds
install and
capabilities to LabVIEw.
Got it. Okay.
And it kind of manages all of that. VIPM is made by a company called JKI. Do you know what JKI stands for?
Hunter and Laura. I'm sorry.
Well, you got Hunter and Laura. Yes, Hunter and Laura.
I know
both
they work for
there.
JKI, but I've never
Okay,
asked.
yeah, well, it stands for James
Jim-
Kring Inc. Or Jim
Jim Kring Inc.
Yeah, I don't know if it's James
I didn't know
Kring
that
or
Jim
Jim
worked
Kring.
at JKI. If I would have known that, I would have got it.
That's his thing, yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Sorry, Jim.
Yeah. But we were talking about giving away tools for free and stuff. And VIPM, they have a free version. They also have a paid version. But that is like an ultimate marketing coup because everybody knows Jim's name. And a large part of them knows name through that. So
Through VIPM.
Yeah.
Smart.
Okay, so I often talk about TDD. What does TDD stand for?
Test-driven development.
Okay. Fabiola would argue with you to say test-driven design, but they're both valid. So we'll give Fab
Developing
some
and
credit.
design.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So speaking of Fab, what does DQMH stand for?
Delacore message. Oh, wait, Q is next. Delacore queued message handler.
Wow. Okay, I'm impressed.
Gotcha.
All right, so I'm going to ask a couple, and I don't know if we actually covered these, but these are terms that get thrown around a lot in our industry, so maybe you'll know some of them. SCADA, S-C-A-D-A. Have you ever heard that term before? That's used a lot. Actually, it's been in the news a lot with like cybersecurity stuff because it's getting attacked a lot lately.
I haven't heard of that. What does
So
it stand
supervisory control and data acquisition.
Mm.
So it's basically stuff that controls like industrial plants and power plants and things like that.
Got it.
But often people like LabVIEW code to do with that. Okay, here's one. DAQ, D-A-Q. This is more directly related. I don't know if we've actually used it in the podcast, but probably.
Well, wasn't Olivia talking about that?
Quite
Anti-doc
possible.
and DAC? Or they...
So,
No.
no, not at all.
Is it DAQ?
D-A-Q, yeah.
Direct answering of questions. No?
It stands for data acquisition.
Okay, all right.
So the AQ kind of they leave out the C and it like, I don't know. But
Well, he was talking about anti-doc.
Yep.
That's his open source.
Anti-doc is an open source tool and it
His open
helps
source
you
tool.
document it. Yeah, so data acquisition is basically the act of taking some real world sensor and collecting that data. So like a sensor doesn't output digital data, it doesn't output some number, it outputs a voltage. And then you have to take that voltage and turn it into a number that the computer can understand. So
Okay.
And this may go way over your head, and that's fine. It probably goes over a lot of people's heads. If you're not an electrical engineer, the data in your computer, like a number gets stored as a series of ones and zeros, right?
Yeah.
So there's
A
an
binary code.
yes, exactly.
One of our sponsors this season was Binary Palette. Should we learn more?
Binary Palette provides software development and consulting services for LabVIEW, Veristand, and test stand-based systems. It is run by Ravi Benawal, a certified LabVIEW architect and LabVIEW champion, with over 2 decades of experience in the NI ecosystem. Binary Palette is committed to crafting software and systems that increase user productivity and simplify workflows while making the experience enjoyable. Want a turnkey test system developed from the ground up or existing systems upgraded? Looking to outsource your software development? Binary Palette is ready to help you drive your next project to success.
Okay, yeah, so a computer stores data as a bunch of ones and zeros, and data acquisition is the art of taking a physical signal and turning it into a series of ones and zeros. So a series of numbers that are also a series of ones and zeros. So, okay, here's one. This we may have used. If you don't know it, that's perfectly fine, but PXI.
Python experimenting instruments.
Well, we just talked about Python quite a bit. This one is PCI extensions for instrumentation.
What does PCI stand for?
That was going to be my next question. And you don't know. So PCI stands for Peripheral Computer Interface. So basically, PCI is if you have a computer, like think the old desktop computers. I don't know if people have desktop computers anymore. I do. But
You do.
You have slots in the back, right, that you can slide things into. Like, remember in the old days you had to buy an Ethernet card and you had to slide an Ethernet card into your computer to be able to plug in the phone cable?
I didn't know there was a card, but I do remember plugging
there's
in
a card
phone
that you
cable.
slide in. So that's a PCI card. So it basically lets your computer talk to some external device. And
Okay.
PXI is an extension for instrumentation. So basically, PXI chassis is a box, and it has a computer in one spot, usually, not always, but it has a computer that like runs Windows or whatever, and then it has a backplane and a bunch of cards that slot into the backplane. Excuse me. And so you might have a card that is a relay card, you might have one that is an oscilloscope or a voltmeter for measuring different signals and like connecting things together. And they all talk along this backplane. So there's like a communications bus across the backplane that they all talk on. And that's called PXI. Cryo, does that mean anything to you?
Cryo. I've seen it.
Yeah, it's not cryogenics.
I know, but I've seen it in your blog posts.
Okay.
It may be one of the ones I skimmed over.
If you don't understand what it is, that's okay. It stands for Compact Reconfigurable I/O, and I/O is input-output. So compact is a small form factor, and it's a thing that basically, it's got a little computer, but it's like more like an embedded computer. So it'd be like one that doesn't run Windows or anything, but just kind of makes decisions. And it's connected to all these modules, and you plug in the modules. Similar to the PXI idea that you plug in the module, and the module does something to take a physical signal from the real world, of voltage, pressure, whatever, and turn it into some digital numbers. The reconfigurable I/O part is an FPGA. Have you heard that term? I think we've talked about that before. Okay. FPGA is Field Programmable Gate Array.
I wasn't going to get that.
So there's a whole bunch of logic gates, and you kind of, basically it's a way to take a piece of silicon, so a piece of so all computer chips and any kind of like integrated circuit chips, like, you know, the old, I don't know if you know the old IC chips, but it's like a little black box with like little legs coming out of it. If you've seen an old circuit board, you may have seen it. Okay.
Where would I see an old circuit board?
I don't know. Circuit boards are around. Like if you ever opened up a computer or TV or television or microwave or some old. Okay. Maybe I'm a nerd.
I'm a theater kid. Why would I do that?
That's a very good point. But anyway, so Field Programmable Gate Array is basically a way to take, basically like you basically create hardware from software. So you write a software thing that says this is what I want the thing to do, and it basically takes this piece of hardware and turns it into that.
Right. Well, there was a discussion earlier about when you were at Westinghouse that they were ordering the hardware before you wrote the software, and then it didn't match, and then you were like, this is totally stupid. Is that a similar?
Maybe. Like if you had an FPGA, you could reprogram it.
Okay.
So it's a piece of hardware, and it's reprogrammable. So you have a piece of hardware that is a computer chip, and you can reprogram the computer chip to do different things.
Oh, cool.
As opposed to like the normal CPU in your computer is programmed to just interpret instructions, and you send the instructions, and it does the silicon does its thing. This, you actually change what the silicon does. And it's much faster. So it's super high-speed applications, you might use an FPGA. Last one I'm going to do, and this one I'm pretty sure you know, CICD.
Continuous integration, continuous development design. Because isn't there a thing about
so
D?
It's development or deployment.
Deployment. Okay, I was going to say the D, I know it's a big thing.
Yeah.
Some people say one, some people
Yeah, delivery is like making it available to your customer. Deployment is actually like taking it and installing it on a specific machine. At least that's my interpretation. So when you write code, does it execute sequentially or in parallel?
It's in parallel. I do know that.
Okay, so yes, you can do stuff in parallel very easily. But actually, the technical answer, if you want to get really technical, is something called Dataflow, which is
because there are some things that trigger other things, and then those things have to be triggered before a certain other thing happens. But there can be multiple things happening on this side while other different things are happening on this side, and also waiting for something over here to trigger to do something over here.
So
is that right?
You're very, very close. It's a nuanced subject, and there are people who program in LabVIEW who don't get this, mostly beginners, because eventually you kind of figure this out. You have to, or you take the LabVIEW Core 1 course, which the one thing it's really good at is teaching you what Dataflow is. So there's this idea called Dataflow. So in a regular programming language, you write lines of text, and when it runs, it literally just goes right down the text file, and it says, run the first line, run the second line, run the third line, and it just keeps going. And
is that what
you can loop back and forth, and you can jump around, but basically it just executes line after line.
And that's what you're talking about when you talk about waterfall? You talk about waterfall a lot.
Okay, so can we table the waterfall discussion?
Let's table the waterfall.
Okay. So sequential versus parallel, right? Sequential is I do these 5 things and I do them in order. Right? And there's some jumping around and things, but basically you just execute one line of code at a time. LabVIEW, things can happen in parallel because basically in text-based programming, what determines the next thing to execute is whatever the next line of code is. In LabVIEW, it's inherently parallel because it's based on the sync data flow. So instead of lines of code, you have a node. So a node is something that takes in some values and has an output. And the input output are both optional, but take in some values, generate an output. Each node only executes when all of its inputs have already been calculated. So everything upstream of it has to have run first, and all that input values have to be available. And then it runs and it does its thing. And only when it's done does it make the output available to the next thing.
Okay.
And because of the way that works, inherently things happen in parallel unless you force them to happen in sequence.
But they can.
They can happen in sequence or in parallel, yeah.
And that's what's better about LabVIEW versus text-based.
Hey, okay, I'll take it.
I don't know.
That sounds great. Hey, it's all cool. What was the next thing we were going to talk about? Oh, the waterfall versus... So that's like on an individual program level or an individual function. Like you've got a chunk of code that does this thing, and that's how it either operates sequentially where you do a bunch of things in order, or it operates in parallel where you do a bunch of things in parallel. Waterfall is kind of a way of thinking about how we develop software. Mm-hmm. So waterfall is a very sequential model where the first thing we do is we gather all the requirements, right? And we figure out exactly what we need this thing to do in great detail. And basically, I call it future prediction because you're saying, this project's going to take 6 months, and these are the exact things we need to have done in 6 months.
But we don't do that.
No, we don't do that at all.
We follow the Agile.
Yep, and the
Agile method where we do different iterations and we deliver like consistently, and we talk with our clients and say, okay, did this work? Yeah. Install this.
Yeah. I hope you understand that because you made a very cool video of us how we work together. So
I did. If you'd like to watch it, check the link in the show notes. Okay.
You did very good.
Did I pass?
You're at least 50%, so that's good. That's better than half.
Solid F.
Hey, C's get degrees, right? That's at least what I was told at some point. So
waterfall is kind of like we make this big plan and we're going to follow this plan regardless of the other factors that come in.
Exactly.
And at SAS Workshops, we do the Agile Samurai method, which you like a lot. You talk about it a lot.
Yeah, there is a book.
Link the book because you talk about it a lot.
It's an awesome book. It's called The Agile Samurai. I like a lot of things about it. I do not do the whole story points thing, but I do pretty much everything else out of that book. And really, in my mind, the art of the Agile thing, it gets a bad name because people kind of misuse it, but basically it's about responding to change and knowing that having a plan up front is like there's an Eisenhower quote, something like, plans are useless, but planning is invaluable. So, you gather that information. The effort that you put into gathering the information for the planning stage is really useful. The concrete plan that you come out of is not that good. There's another quote, something like, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Right? So you come up with this perfect plan, and then you go out, and you think you're going to bend the world to your role, but the world gets a say. So we have a thing in mountaineering, like, you've got your plan, the mountain also has a say. So, like, you're going to get up at 5 a.m. and go do this thing, and then the 60-mile-an-hour winds and blowing snow, and you're like, okay, I'll go back to bed or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Because the mountain gets to say too. So in software engineering, the customers get a say, the market gets a say, the technology gets a say, right? And so, maybe you have this great idea, but the technology's not quite there yet, or maybe you have a great idea and you're going along and the technology changes out from under you, right? Some operating system goes obsolete, they find some bug, whatever, and it just doesn't work. So being able to respond to change is really huge. And I think part of it depends on what kind of companies you work with. So when I worked at Westinghouse, it was a very slow-moving company. It was nuclear industry, heavily regulated. So you could kind of get away with the waterfall. I still don't think it's the best way to do things, but they could kind of get away with it because the requirements change very slowly.
Right.
But if you're producing a commercial product, the market changes, right? If you start a product today and you're like, hey, I see this need in the market, I'm going to fill it. Well, in a year, you might have some competitors who are doing something different, and maybe you have to change what you're doing, or your marketing was not quite right. We marketed these couple features, and out of these 5 features, they liked 4 of them. Mm-hmm. Well, then why waste time on the 5th one, right? Or maybe they require some other 5th feature, and you swap it out for another one. And so you have to be able to make those changes.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to do it in a quick and easy way. And so part of it is the way you manage the projects, which is the agile part of it. And then there's also technical excellence, which is writing your code in such a way that making those changes is easy and having the technical skills to actually be able to do that. So it's kind of twofold. It's how do you manage the project and break down the work and break things down into small steps so you can do this, and then how do you actually have the technical skills to be able to make it all work and pull it all together. So yeah, that's kind of my take on software engineering in a nutshell. Or in 2 minutes or however long that took me.
It felt like 17.
To me, it felt like 10 seconds, but okay. I'm sure our listeners will have the timestamp at the bottom and tell me exactly how long it is. I'll probably get some feedback about that. Like, she said 17, you said 2, and it was more like 5 or something. So I really enjoyed the season. I think it's great. I do it because I enjoy it, which is actually a very valuable thing. So life is short. You should do stuff you enjoy.
We have gotten a lot of really good emails and notes on YouTube and Discord, and we had some people at GDevCon that actually reported some testimonials that kind of warmed our hearts.
The LabVIEW Experiment is a great podcast. I think it's doing a lot of great work. Sam is always out there championing the community, highlighting voices that we sometimes see on the forums but don't get to hear directly. And it's nice to get that live interaction with some of the best minds in LabVIEW.
And we also have some amazing sponsors who we'll shout out one more time just because they're really cool and I very much appreciate them.
Casey, Mike, Dan, and Adam at Zai Solutions, thank you so much. Ravi at Binary Palette, thank you so much for the sponsorships.
And hopefully
Patreon
some
members.
more. So
Hopefully we get some more.
This episode of the LabVIEW Experiment podcast is brought to you by Sam drinking yerba mate from a gourd. Drinking yerba mate from a gourd has many benefits, including gaining the attention of everyone in the room, creating loud slurping noises suitable for horror flicks, and having to refill the gourd a lot because it is so small. Try drinking yerba mate from a gourd today. Do you know that Sam lived in Argentina for a while?
I did not.
Emery Tazuner, our sole Patreon member at the moment. You can join.
Actually, Norm joined during
So
the
thank you very much,
live,
Norm.
the live
Yes.
recording. He
So
joined.
we've got 2.
We've got 2.
We doubled our size at GDevCon. That was a
We
great
doubled
investment.
it. Wow, that was awesome. Look at us. But seriously, thank you everybody for supporting us, listening to us, asking questions, being curious, wanting to be on the podcast. We love it. I love hearing from everybody.
No.
And if you're interested in being on the podcast for season 2, hit me up. We have some spots. Our contact information will be in the show notes. Anything else you want to say, Sam?
Thank you to everyone who is involved in any way. I could not do all this by myself. I've got Taylor and Noah helping me here, and Steven even when we started. And
we've
also
got Nate
business
Lapgard of the Kite and Dark Group did
Yep,
our
we should give him a
music.
shout out. Yeah, he did a logo.
He did our logo and our music, which we love.
He's a great business coach, by the way.
Yes. Kayla Wright, also from the Kite and Dark Group, did all of our marketing for the season. We love her. She's great to bounce ideas off of.
And the show would be very boring if it was just me talking about my thoughts. We got to make sure we thank all our guests.
Yeah. Thank you to all of our guests who stopped the rambling and got to get some words in edgewise.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I think that's it.
Call it a wrap. All right. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank
Taylor
you,
deserves
Sam.
the most thanks. All right.
See you in season 2.
Cut. There we go. Beautiful.
That's a burrito.
Oh, that's a burrito.
That's it for today's episode of the LabVIEW Experiment. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or questions, head over to thelabviewexperiment.com and drop me a note. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the LV Experiment.